Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to another one of my episodes. I am William Wallace, and with me today is Carmen Maria Montiel, who's running for Congress in Texas. Carmen, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, William.
You're welcome.
Same here. I appreciate it greatly.
Well, you're welcome. Look, you're welcome not only because you run for Congress, and I'll repeat some of the same things I tell everybody, but I love candidates because they're very passionate about our country and fixing things. But when I met you at CPAC a couple weeks ago, again, I've had a couple other candidates. I just interviewed one named Kimberly Lowe. She's running in Virginia. It's just refreshing. It's refreshing meeting people who are very passionate about our country. But I think when people listen to your story and they hear you talk, they're not only going to be inspired, but be inspired about who's running, inspired to get involved. But also, your story says a lot about why more people should love America.
Yes.
So let's talk about where's your district now that you'll be running for Congress.
Well, it's been like the lines has changed. It's
Mhm.
District 18 in Houston. It's kind of like a donut. It goes, wraps around
I
from
got
the
your flyer.
northeast.
I got your flyer right here.
Yeah. From the
Yeah.
northeast, go all the way, goes down, cross downtown, medical center, and then it wraps around, towards the west and completely almost make a full loop to a donut, but there is a little bitty that is open. And so when the lines changed, the demographics changed. So it used to be primarily a Black community, then Hispanics, then white, and small portion of Asians. So now is majority. The majority are Latinos, 44 to 47% Latinos, then Blacks 35%, 17% white, and the rest are Asians.
So who are you running against?
Well, I'm running against, well, let me say it the way I like to say it. I am Sheila Jackson Lee's retirement plan.
I love that. That's fantastic. So you're running against Sheila Jackson Lee. That's
Yes.
okay. Now we're really getting fired up because we know that she's someone who hasn't been very pro America. And
No,
and, and now that we know that, people are really going to see the difference between you, who's very American, and someone who has policies that are not, to be known as being pro America.
yes, and she's been there almost 28 years and has never passed a law. And so recently, she just, for the first time in 27 years, passed a law, which tells you she's worried. She's
Yeah.
like finally getting the job done, but too little, too late.
Well, what's very interesting is even though she hasn't had a law passed, 28 years is a long time. I'm a
It's
term limit guy. Yeah, thank you, appreciate that. Like you know, I'm a founding fathers guy. I'm a freedom liberty guy, and when you look at the founding fathers, and they didn't put term limits in there. When you read the Federalist Papers, you read things about term limits, and I kind of follow their lead that I would like it if we would vote elected officials out that either been there too long or aren't doing a good job. But the problem is money has taken over in our society, and people just keep staying in, and they keep perpetuating their bad ideas, or their bad ideas become perpetual, I guess is the right way to say it. And
Well, I already signed my pledge for term limits because I am like you. I think that staying there too long doesn't help the country, actually corrupts the person. And not only in politics, even on bureaucratic positions. People should not be in those bureaucratic positions forever. And I'm completely against it.
so
And that's
that's
why,
interesting. It's funny you say that because I don't know if we were talking about the same person or not, or the same organization, but I was at the Capitol today in Baton Rouge, at our state capitol, and there's someone there from an organization called U.S. Term Limits, and
uh-huh.
and that's their belief, is that term limits on not just, or actually it's Convention of States believes in that too, where not just term limits on politicians, but term limits on bureaucrats.
Definitely.
It'd be a way
It
to
should
drain. It would be a way to automatically drain the swamp. You know.
completely, totally. But we need to raise and get honest,
Hmm.
true patriots, people in those positions, and raise honest, patriotic children, which right now, sadly, the left has overtaken our education and colleges, and they're raising a generation that hates our country. Not my children because they have me, but even private schools, there's completely twist and manipulation of our children, and we need to, even parents and us, we need to retake back our education and make a point that the education in school is about teaching kids math, English, physics, but not all this distortion. And actually, they have to teach love of country. I'm sorry, I don't believe anything else. Our children should be reciting the Pledge of Allegiance every day, uh, as a patriotic thing. We do it here in Texas whenever we meet. In our Republican
That's right.
clubs, we have the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have the Texas
Oh,
allegiance, because I believe we're like the only state that do have one, but
well,
it's
what's interesting?
Texas.
Yeah, yeah, that's a story for another day. But I know that the state of Texas, some of the originalists claim that they never really officially became part of the United States, and they always had that little clause that they can always succeed at any time they want. So maybe they should have their own Pledge of Allegiance. But
We
I love
do.
that there's a Pledge of America. So let's talk about your story. You actually are from Venezuela, correct?
Yes, I am.
So you know all about the dichotomy between a socialist country, or let me back up. I'm going to tell you a story a little bit because I want you to tell it eventually. But you told me earlier about how you went from Venezuela before it was communist or became socialist, getting out of there in time and coming to America. Will you tell us that story, please?
Well, Venezuela was this beacon of hope in the region, in
Mhm.
Latin America. We were and still are rich on the ground, but at that time, the country was developed, was in progress. We were the only country that had the opportunity to become a developed country. I always tell people I did not grow up in a third world country. We were a country, and that was the label, and that's what they told us when we went to school. We were a country on the road to development. We were going to become a developed country. And then I came to United States to further my education, and the plan was to go back. We did not do it. And then from afar, from here, I got to see the destruction of my country, completely frustrated because I was not able to do anything to save it, because I would have gotten involved. I'm the type of person that sees a problem and I want to solve it. But so when I started to see the signs here, because people needs to understand that this communist agenda is a manual, and they follow the same steps because it has worked so many
Right.
times. So I started seeing the signs. First of all, I always say I came to this country. It was an easy country. You solve problems with a call, with sending something on over the mail. With times, everything became more difficult, more costly. Bureaucracy
Yeah.
started to grow, and the corruption. And I started to see how we were every day looking more and more like Venezuela, especially after Obama. And then I have experience through the legal system and through my divorce, and realized that the courts were corrupt. And all of that was a parallel with Venezuela, because my father, who love America, the love that I have for America, I learned from my father. He idealized America because he always said it was the greatest country.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, when Venezuela was booming, imagine that was the best time ever. And we were all young, my siblings and I. My father was telling us, this is over. Venezuela has no future. You all need to go to United States and stay over there. And he pushed us to come here and to stay. So when I started seeing these signs so similar to Venezuela, I realized, well, I now understand what my father was seeing. I'm a journalist. I'm a realtor now, but that's my education, and my background is of journalism. So in the 80s, when I was going to school, and my dad was like, come on, you should be a
So
lawyer.
80s, you're in school in Venezuela, right?
Excuse me?
In the 80s, you were in school in Venezuela.
Yes, I was in
I'm,
school.
so here's what I'm doing. I'm gonna dissect some of the things that you just now said. I've listened very intently, and I want to, and as a listener, I want to help our listeners understand kind of your timeline, because I got a little lost in it, but because I've talked to you before. So in the 80s, you were in Venezuela, right?
Yes.
And Venezuela at that time was when they were prospering, they were on the rise, doing really, really well, correct?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
when
we
you
were fantastic. Uh-huh.
when did Venezuela fall? When did they actually succumb to socialism and communism?
Well, it was a small process. This is what I'm telling you. In the 80s, my dad wanted me to be a lawyer. And I told my dad, I wanted to be a lawyer. He said
Yeah.
that I would be great. And I said, Dad, I'm sorry, I cannot be a lawyer and lose a case because somebody paid more. This was already happening in Venezuela in the 80s. So there were little things. Bureaucracy started to grow. That started to happening in the 80s, the 70s and 80s. We got the migrant invasion through our borders.
Right,
It's and the children of those migrants were the ones who voted for Hugo Chavez, who was finally what completely it just make the
right,
country to succumb. And then we in the 90s and in early 2000s, we got what it was called the colectivos, which is, this is destabilizing the country with people on the streets committing crimes, burning things, attacking. Well,
mm,
doesn't, sounds familiar.
right.
The colectivos are Antifa and Black Lives Matters. So that's why I've been seeing all these parallel. And finally, when Hugo Chavez was elected in 1998, he went fast into moving the country to the left, changed the constitution, and stop the oil production. Sounds familiar?
Right, exactly. That does sound very familiar. And people don't realize how history repeats itself. I was just talking with a friend of mine today who was talking about the similarities between Hitler and Putin. And when you look at the similarities, I'm not going to have all of that at the disposal right now, especially time wise, to try to dig them back up. Even though it was just a little while ago, when you look at the similarities between, say, Putin and Hitler at the time, it's strikingly similar. But like you're talking about now, how Chavez and Biden are doing a lot of the same things. And what's even scarier and more surprising to me is how many people will listen to us and say, "Oh, that's that conspiracy thinking. Biden's not going to be like Chavez. It's our country will never go there." But that's how it happens when people aren't watching and people aren't paying attention. Which is that what you say would happen at what happened in Venezuela?
Well, the Cubans warned us. When this was happening in Venezuela, we had a big Cuban community because, they already left their country because of
Mm.
communism with Fidel Castro. And the Cubans were telling us, look, what's happening? You are going to be like Cuba. And we were like, oh, no,
Yeah.
we're not an island.
We're
That
not
was the
we
first
we
thing.
have oil, we got prosperity, we got freedom.
Exactly. And we're like, no, 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 no. And now, look, it happened. And that's when I started noticing. I started telling people here in the United States, it's happening here. And when I ran for Congress 4 years ago, I lost in the runoff by 83 votes to ballot by mail, by the way. And
Yeah,
I
let me started
remember,
on that one.
yeah, and I remember how I was already telling people this is the path we're going. And there were many people that were like, she's crazy. Now everybody believes it. Now everybody's like, Carmen, you're telling the truth. Your story needs to be heard. You've been
Right.
telling the truth for so long.
And that's why when I met you at CPAC and I've talked to you and I've heard your story and granted I'm getting a lot more detail now, but when I heard your story and I met you, I went, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing, to have someone like you that's fighting for our country." I mean, you're from a country that, went from nothing to something and then fell back into nothing, all as a result of bad policies and socialist techniques and everything. And now you're raising that flag, that warning flag, telling people here, watch out. But there's another piece of information that I know about you. you were once Miss Venezuela. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, you acknowledge that very calmly. Why is that?
I'm sorry, what?
You were once Miss Venezuela, weren't you?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You see that very. So what? That was that right when you were in before you went to college, or when was that?
It was my first year in college. I always said that was an accident. I never planned it. I never imagined. I was never the little girl that said, I want to be Miss Venezuela. I met the president of the pageant when I was 60 years old.
Right,
He told me I should be in the pageant. I didn't like it. I was like, no, for 2 years.
right.
After 2 years, I got curious, of course, because he insisted so much. I
Yeah.
said, well, so I'm going to win. I'll probably win Miss Universe. And then I have to spend another year convincing my dad, who was extremely conservative father. And I ended up going for the first time ever, and I won the pageant, and I won Miss South America, and I got to be second runner up in the Miss Universe pageant.
Wow, that's pretty neat. So you actually, this is not only is it an interesting story, but when you combine it with your unique life experience from being in a country that you were, it's when I repeat the timeline, you were there in your country before it became a thriving, great country with all the resources and doing well and being prosperous. You got to see it prosperous. You
Yeah,
got to really not only enjoy that prosperity,
I did.
but you got a chance to live in the in a realm where most people, you got to be a beauty queen. Basically, you got to be Miss Venezuela, and then you came, and your father kept encouraging you go to America where it's free, where it's a great country. You came here for college. Let's talk about that, because I think all of these things about you really tells what's not only in your heart, but tells why you have such a passion for our country and why you're running for Congress there. So
Well,
you
yeah, I came to the United States in 1988. I was Miss Venezuela in 1984. And I went to college. I spent 1 year in North Carolina, and improving my
right,
English. I needed to do that in order to enter college. And then I went to East Tennessee State University. And with a language that I just happened to learn,
yeah,
eh, I graduated magna cum laude. So I always say that because I want people to know that beauty is not divorced from brains. That
right.
yes, I was a beauty queen, but I was very focused in my life, in my education. I always been very smart. I imagine graduating magna cum laude with a language that I just learned. That's
With
pretty
English,
incredible.
right?
Yes. And
That's
then I came
amazing.
to Houston, and we stay in Houston. Yeah.
Well, now, where did you go to college? And where did you go to college in Houston?
No, I graduated East Tennessee State University.
East Tennessee.
Yes,
Okay.
ETSU.
Okay. And then from there you went on. Then from there you took that degree and went to Texas, and you were going to do what in Texas?
I came straight to work with Telemundo. Telemundo at the time was partnered
Right.
with CNN. We did the Spanish version of the news for CNN, and I worked as a reporter for a couple of months, and then earned the anchor woman chair,
Yeah.
and I was the anchor woman for the newscast here in Houston until, well, I started having my children, and working in the news 5 and 10 p.m. is not compatible with having children.
Right.
So I went in to develop a medical practice. So I became an entrepreneur, always working in charity. That's something that I did since I was an adolescent, when I went in my teenage year with my
Mhm.
church. As a Miss Venezuela, I'm still the only Miss Venezuela that created a foundation to work for pediatric hospitals. So then when I was here, and my children were little, I went back to do some charity, started investing in real estate, fell in love with real estate, and that's what I do nowadays.
What
There
I,
is no
what
way
I,
I would be able to work in the news nowadays, Telemundo or any other. They would have fired me.
oh, because of your ideologies.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and I love learning about our candidates in such a way, because it really tells not only your story, but it tells a lot about yourself and your unique set or your unique skill set. of qualifications that you may be able to bring to Congress with you. Now, I'm still enjoying the fact that you only lost by 86 votes and there are mail-in ballots. So obviously you believe in election integrity, or, shall I say the election of crime that happened last year. Is that correct?
Well, I lost 83 votes to ballot by mail, and because the what is called the tendency was not accurate. The ballot by mail votes, he had 75% of the votes, but as soon as we went to early voting, I got 61%, and the day of election 68%. So you have to remember that I come from Venezuela, and for the last over 20 years, we have seen how our elections have been stolen in Venezuela. That we go to the polls, we got the exit polls, and we're like, okay, the opposition, we call
Right.
ourselves the
Right.
opposition, is winning. Finally, we're going to get rid of the regime. And there was a time in Venezuela that we knew the results of the elections that same night, and then we started that no, they didn't have the results, and then we have to go to bed, and then by the next day we find out, and then the result flip and the regime stay in power. Sounds familiar?
Sounds very familiar. Yeah. Well, that's just it. A lot of people, and then a lot of people don't realize. Now, look, I'm not when it comes to the election integrity issue, I'm not as much against the ballot machines as I am, or I'm not as much out against the ballot machines as I am the ballot harvesting that goes on through the mail-in ballot system or through the absentee ballot system. That's where I specialize in. Now, I'm aware that our ballot machines have problems, and I'm not a disbeliever, okay, but that I'm laying that groundwork. So I don't know enough about the machines to be a believer or disbeliever, but I do know enough about them to know that the machines that were used in Venezuela during the time when those elections were, just like you said, they were stolen. They were, when they had the problems, those are the same voting machines that they're using in our country now.
The problem is the software.
Okay.
The machines, like in Texas, we don't use Dominion. We use another brand, but the software is the same. And the software was developed in Venezuela. And it was developed in order for Hugo Chavez to stay, and his regime to stay in power always, forever. And I don't understand how in this country we allow to have a software that is not made in America, and especially a software that is known, that is being used in Venezuela, and it's being used in many different countries where there's been problems of fraud. So I believe in we have a series of problems in election, which is vote harvesting. We have dead people that never clear the voting
Rolls, right.
rolls. And with the latest legislature here in Texas, apparently they were all clear of the voting rolls. And then we have the problem with the machines. And it's so similar. Like my father passed away 22 years ago, yet my father still is a active voter in Venezuela. And that
Really?
is, yes. My brother was the one that researched the
Yeah.
information and find it out. And that's an insult to us and to his memory, because especially my father would have never voted for them. My dad was a very conservative man. He was a capitalist, and that's why he pushed us to be here. Now, he never in his life imagined United States could have ever, go that route.
Well, it bothers me that I have friends who say, because I'm a guy that says, look, we should have some sort of a paper ballot system that you can use machines to count it, so you can get a quick count, and you can because people want their results. Like I have friends that at the polls close at 7 o'clock, they are watching their phones at 5 to 7. So when the polls
Yeah.
close at 7 o'clock, and at 7:05 they're dumping the absentee ballot count, and they're already doing their calculation on to try to use that to try to figure out how they can hypothesize on who the winner's going to be. And they get aggravated with me when I talk about paper ballots. Like, oh, you want to go back to an antiquated system? I said, no, I want to go back to a system that can be that's harder to hack into. I want a system that is easier, is more accessible for people to vote. I want something that is where more people can vote easier, but I want something that's accurate and auditable. And so
I agree.
if you had a paper ballot system, I mean, look, you look at France, there's other countries that don't even let you vote on a voting machine. And I'll go to that later because now that I'm in the election integrity arena and I've been in Louisiana right now, we're picking new voting machines. So we are going in. So we are actually, there's a committee that's picking their next voting machine. And I've been sitting and watching these things. And there is a system where you can vote by paper. The machine counts it, so you can get your accurate, your instant results. And then there's a system should be set in place where everything's auditable. And everybody says, "Well, who wants to count votes?" And I said, the average precinct has 1,200 people. Across America, the average precinct is 1,200 people. If you can't tell me that election poll workers can't count to 1,200 or do stacks of 100 and 12 stacks and count it and
Yes.
audit it and be willing to stay that extra hour to make sure our elections are secure, then we have a problem. So I don't want to go off on election integrity too much, but I know that it's part of what you believe in. And I
Yeah.
want to be able to get people just to know you and talk about your passion and running for office. So knowing all of this, what gave you because you said when you ran last time, you lost by 80 something votes, but you mentioned a guy's name. So were you in a different district or were you running for a different position?
I was in a different district, and that was the primaries. I went to the runoff. I didn't make it to the general.
Yeah.
And then I waited for 4 years. I'm glad I didn't run in 2020 because doing a campaign during the pandemic would have been very difficult.
Right.
And the time is right due to the census, due to the
Right.
changes that had happened in the district. And I feel very positive about the possibilities, especially because Latinos are finally realizing that we are conservative at heart.
Yes.
We've always been. And Latinos have been duped by the Democrats, and now they're realizing, and the Latinos are just voting massively for Republicans. So this is the time. The time is right for me right now.
So maybe all these people coming from the southern border are actually be Republican voters, and the Democrats are getting mad that they opened up the borders.
Well, I truly believe that Latinos are going to save the United States of America.
I like that. Okay, well, let's hope. Look, we need some people to help save this country because I really believe we're in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do. We got some issues, that are happening, right now. So, so going back to immigration, it took you how many years to become a citizen?
14. 14 years.
So you went through the legal process to be able, it went through for 14 years to become a citizen. That's how important it was to you.
I'm sorry, it took me
That's
14 years.
that's how important it was to you.
Oh,
To
definitely. It's very important. Listen, one of the things that I always appreciate and admire on this country was that this country is a country of law. Now they don't want to apply and enforce the law. And so for me, there was no other way but to come here illegally, obey the law, and have my pathway to legality as a resident, and later on as a citizen of this country. Especially because when we lost Venezuela, and we realized as soon as Hugo Chavez won, I became countryless. I didn't have a country. I cannot even go to Venezuela. I felt like that. You remember that Tom Cruise movie, the guy in the airport in New York that didn't have a country and he was trapped at the airport when he
Oh,
goes
right.
back?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's basically how Venezuelans are. We don't have a country. And that's when I always tell people, I say, I already lost a country. I will not lose another one. And that's my compromise, because I'm worried what's going to happen with my children. Are they going to have a future? and where are we going to go after this? There is no place to go. And I hate when the liberals have this propaganda that this is not the best country in the world. And well, if it is not the best country in the world, why we have all these people coming through
Right.
the border? You
Then why
know,
don't why don't we tell them to go back to go to Venezuela and see how they like it?
and I don't see anybody in boats going to Cuba and Venezuela.
How often do you get to go back to Venezuela?
I'm sorry.
How often do you get to go back to Venezuela?
I haven't been in the last 10 years, and I'm not planning to go because, especially by now, they know my position. I'm sort of known in Venezuela. Not only I was Miss Venezuela, then I had a successful TV career in Venezuela before I came here. So they know my position. It'll be too risky to go to Venezuela.
Okay. So that you definitely want to get back there and not be able to come back to the greatest country of the world.
Exactly. Don't
So
come back in my country from now on. And you're talking about Venezuela and not being able to go. Let me tell you, one of the things that this administration did, and this happened last week, Maduro, Nicolas Maduro, and the top people in his government, they all have criminal charges filed on them, for drug trafficking and violation of human rights. They all have prices on their heads. 50 Maduro have $50 million by the FBI. Somebody caught him, and he will get pay $50 million, and so is the people closest to him. Yet, and he's not recognized as a president by the United States. When the assembly, because one of the things we used to have, like United States Congress and Senate,
right.
and the communists, they do away from that and create what is called the Communist Assembly, one house. When the assembly turned him down because legally he could not be president anymore, and the president of the assembly became president, United States was the first country that recognized him as the president and did not, and this is since 2019, does not recognize Maduro. But then Biden sends a group of people to negotiate the sale of oil, and that just legitimized Nicolas Maduro as the president that he's not. And then negotiate to buy oil when the production of oil in Venezuela is nothing. There is nothing to buy from
Wow.
Venezuela, and it's an insult to all the dead people that have given their life fighting for our freedom or have died as a result of the regime of Nicolas Maduro and the work that we all put from here trying to push that the opposition leader became the president of Venezuela, recognized by Donald Trump. And when I saw that, that was the biggest slap on the face. And this administration was getting ready to buy oil. But let me tell you, the backslash was so bad, and they further lost more points with the Latino community that apparently they're not going to buy oil
Right.
from Venezuela.
So this is amazing. As I hear you talk about Venezuela, it's almost like I have to keep reminding myself that you're talking about Venezuela and not about America.
Yes.
When you talk about the oil problems and the and all the different problems that were going on and everything like that, and then you talk about how Biden legitimized their government, and I didn't even realize, because it's not publicized as much, that Maduro is not considered a legitimate president on there. But if he has a bounty on his head, why don't they go in and try to get him?
Well, actually, they should have gone with handcuffs instead of going to negotiate.
Right, exactly.
Duh.
That's a good one. They should go with handcuffs. I like that. So let's talk about what. So obviously, and sometimes I'm asking the obvious. Obviously, this is what gave you the passion to run for office.
Yes.
The prior run that you lost was that also for Congress?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so this one is for Congress, and so what was all of this that just kind of accumulated and came to a head at one point where you said, "I've got to do something for our country"?
Well, let me tell you, I always tell people, my name is Carmen Montiel, and I come from the future. Because when you come from Venezuela,
Yeah,
we
you've
come
seen it
from the
firsthand.
future. We've seen it happening. and we recognize it. And I can tell you how this could end, could, because
Right.
we're not going to allow it to happen. So
Right.
when I realized that that's where we're heading, I said, I have two choices. I
Hmm.
can either stay at home, do nothing,
Right.
and wait for the government to come to my door and say, well, your house is no longer yours, or
Mm.
I go out and fight. So I decided to go out and fight.
Unbelievable. That's fantastic. So the passion in your heart just overwhelmed one day, and you said, "We're going to have to do this." I mean, obviously, do you still have family in Venezuela?
I still do, not much, but I still do. We're spread around the world, which is very sad because they have destroyed our families. We are very family oriented, and we used to get together and have parties, not parties, whatever, but the
Right.
families were always together. And now, in order to accomplish that, is so very difficult because we're all over the world. So it's when we see, it's like two or three, we celebrate it like never before because those opportunities to be together, they're gone,
Right.
and we don't know if we ever will get them back.
And I keep bringing up that parallel, or that analogy rather, because I think it's very important for people to see. And I love your tagline, and you told me at CPAC, and I forgot it, which is that you come from the future.
Yes.
That you saw what it was like, and there's so many people here in our country that don't believe that this could ever happen in our country. They go, "Oh, that's that conspiracy thinking." And I bring up that word a whole lot because not that I hear it a lot, but every so often, I'll hear from one of my friends that they're the people that they're so busy with their lives, and they're so busy thinking that it could not happen to America, that if you ever dare show that it has happened elsewhere or the problems of our country, then you're the conspiracy theorist. But yet you're somebody who's experienced it firsthand,
And yeah.
and you're here in America watching those things happen. I've talked to some people from Cuba. Actually, I've talked to some older people from Cuba that were there when Castro first took over, and they know the whole story about Che and Castro. They can tell you firsthand. Matter of fact, um, golly, I just remembered.
Oh,
I met a woman who was one of the, is it the Peter Pan kids? Is
oh,
it they called the kids that were able to get out of Cuba right before Castro took over?
oh, I don't remember how they call
I
that.
think they're called,
Was
well, anyway, so she was in this in the first, exodus of children that were able to be sent over in boats.
imagine?
And
Oh,
what's that?
I imagine these kids living by themselves.
Right. Well,
That's
she
heartbreaking.
actually told me the story of how her father knew Castro. And she told me these frightening stories of him. And she says people just don't realize, how easy it is. And she was the same thing. She told me the same thing you're telling me, how easily it can happen to us here in America if we
Yes.
don't watch our freedoms instead of checking them at the door just because we're busy or we don't want to believe that something that's going to be happening. And I always tell people, even if it sounds like a conspiracy theory, like I have to my friends, like, oh, that election fraud stuff is just a conspiracy thinking. I say, let's just say it. Let's just say that it is. Can we at least talk about it to prevent it from happening? Let's just
Exactly.
say let's just say it is a conspiracy. Can we talk about it to prevent it from happening? Because I said this in the last interview, and I'll say it with you. I ran for state representative in my area, in my district, 3 years ago. So I ran for office for a state representative here, and I had the Secretary of State's voting the registration voting records to be able to go knock on every door, all the registrations. And I noticed how many irregularities there are on our voting registrations, here in just my district. And I
Yeah.
live in an area that you would never expect it, but they had Democrats where there were Republicans living. They had, seven registered election voters when they only had three people living in the house. I saw the irregularities.
Yeah.
And then when I went to Mike Lindell's symposium, I met with people that are canvassing neighborhoods all over the country, finding the same irregularities.
Yeah.
And then you look at how there are more mail-in ballots than there were people who were registered to vote, or more mail-in ballot. And you look at all these different irregularities. I know, you see, you've experienced it. I like how you do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You
You
know, there
experienced.
is something that nobody talks about it. There is 30 million more votes than people registered to vote in the last 2020 election. And nobody talks about that. It's
Right,
like, how can you explain that?
right.
How?
Well, when you look at how many ballots came in at 3 a.m., and you look and you look at how many of them were all for one candidate, and it's known information, but the problem is people want to see it in a meme, and they want to see it, they want to see it in a meme, but they also want to see it, in a one page.
Well,
Carmen.
like you say, but all of that, people say, oh, you're a conspirator. It's not true. When we saw the videos, when we saw the people testifying for it, so it's sad. It's sad that people don't want to believe what happened.
So Carmen, I have focused on you and your story because I feel that it's really important. I think your story makes you the candidate who you are. And I feel that your story and the candidate that you are is going to be something that I think is what people need to know about to vote for you.
Yes.
And from what I can tell, and I don't even know who you're running against other than the Democrat. I don't know about any other Republicans, and you don't have to share that because I'm usually protective over other. I don't like Republicans talking about other
Oh,
Republicans.
well, we're already past the primaries. I mean,
Okay,
this is it. This is going to be between Sheila Jackson Lee and I. And she's the Democrat and I'm the Republican. Our primaries were on March 1st here
okay,
in
oh,
Texas. Yeah.
fantastic. That's
Yeah.
even better yet. Well,
Yes.
that was right after you got back from CPAC.
Yes, it was right there. The only reason, I went, it was crazy for us to be there right before the primaries, but I believe we're the state with the earliest primaries
Yeah. So
in the
now
whole
that we
country.
know, so good. Now I have my next set of questions for you. So
Okay.
now that you've made it through the primaries, and again, sometimes I ask questions even though I kind of know the answer. I know the answer. I ask questions because our viewers
Exactly.
don't know the answers. So what happened? So now that you've made it through the primaries, now that you're on the other side, it's between just you and Sheila Jackson Lee. Let's talk about why people should switch their votes who may have voted from Sheila Jackson Lee before for the last 26 years, or what is it, 28 years she's been in
Yeah,
office?
almost 28. Yeah.
Yeah, almost 20 years. So let's switch from why should people that have voted for her or always vote for her, why they should switch their vote now to you and why they should vote for you.
Well, she has sold herself to the radical far left side of her party,
Mhm.
in which the way it has affected us is, leaving the border open the way it is. And with this plan of defunding the police, the crime is very high in my district. Is the number one uh, issue of importance. Then there is inflation. The Biden administration with his plan of that he closed the oil production, stop the gas pipe, and have increased, have caused the inflation, not only, the gas price, but every time we go to the grocery stores.
So
And
what can you do about inflation?
well, we need to reactivate our oil production. That's the
Okay.
easiest,
Yeah.
fastest way to do it.
I love it, but I ask the question because sometimes I gotta get the answer out.
Well, another thing we need, the Democrats need to stop talking about this uh, green energy that is actually going to destroy our planet. Nobody talks about that.
How's
How,
that?
how, huh?
How is that?
Well, listen, first of all, you need fossil fuel to fabricate all of them.
Right. Okay.
Oh, which is kind of funny.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly right.
Stop, stop oil production. But yeah, hold on. We need the fossil fuel to fabricate, whether it is, wind, or solar, or the batteries on these cars. And
Right.
then what happened is wind and solar take massive amount of land that is covered and are used by this. It create, kill the fauna completely, and then that needs to be replaced every 20 years, and it's not biodegradable. It have to be buried.
See now, have you seen the movie? And I'm making a plug for a movie right now. It's called The Planet of Humans.
Oh no, I
Have you?
haven't.
It's by Michael Moore. And
Oh
you see, it's the same. Everybody gets the same reaction.
yeah.
Carmen, I'm telling you, if you watch the movie by Michael Moore, The Planet of Humans, you're already saying some things on the movie. Believe it or not, it's actually a movie that shows some of the horrors of the green energy movement. Now,
It's
I'm
terrible.
not against. Let me just say this: I'm not against renewable energy. I'm I like the idea of solar panels. I like the idea of wind turbines. However, I think there's a smart way to do it, and there's an irresponsible way to do it. And to your point, when you watch the movie Planet of Humans, it talks about how wind turbine companies are going into deserts, and they're just eradicating all of the cactuses and the vegetation and everything, and they're building these wind farms. And like you said, when the wind farms go bad, they just let them fall on the ground and deteriorate. So not only have they ruined the ecosystem and the environment, but they've ruined, they're leaving decaying fiberglass and never. So I understand your point, and we're not going to get through this in this interview, but I'm with you that if you, and then I don't want to hold the oil companies. I don't make them evil villains, because the oil companies are funding a lot of the green energy project or the renewable energy for years down the road, when we can
But
do
you
it.
know why?
Why?
Because the government forced them.
Correct.
The government forced the oil companies to dedicate a percentage of
Right.
them to the green energy. So I'm against that.
No, I understand what you're saying, and again, we're not going to be able to hash it out all in this one, but I'm with you. We've got to drill, baby, drill. I'm all about keeping our oil
Yeah.
production up, and instead of trying to rush in green energy in a way that's going to hurt our environment, like the clear cutting of our deserts and everything. We need to find ways to do it responsibly and smarter, and I think that would happen if they didn't try to rush it in ways that are going to kill the oil companies, destroy our economies, and find ways to make it smarter. Watch that movie, Michael Moore's Planet of the Humans, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I'm going to see it, but you know,
You'll
look
like it.
what
No,
happened, and they are reliable. Look what
you'll
happened in
thank me.
Texas
It'll
a
make
year
it'll
ago.
yeah, you'll thank me. You will like the movie. I love the movie. I'll tell you that right now.
I'm
But
going to
anyway,
look for it. Planet of
you,
the
you,
Humans. I'm going to
you
watch
got
it
you gotta
tonight.
you gotta find it. So talk to me about we've talked about economy. What would be the first thing you would do to help the economy? What would be the first thing that you would do to help stop crime in your district? Because you talked about crime in your district.
Well, we first of all we need to. The first thing we need to do is that there was a law here that the county judge. I don't know if that figure exists in Louisiana. The county judge is like to say like the mayor of the county, and there is many cities in the county that they reform the bond law, and with that bond law, all the criminals are let out right away, whether they pay
Right.
bond or they don't pay
They're
any
getting rid of
bonds.
they're getting rid of cash bail.
Exactly. And they are all, and they can multiple times, and they're all out on the street. That's a major issue. This whole plan of defund the police, even though we haven't done it here in Houston, but it have really demoralized the police force,
Mhm.
and many of them are just returning. So we have uh, our police force. It's less than it used to be, and then we need to close the border. We need to close the border. Nobody talks about the crime that is
Right.
coming through the border. The border is about human trafficking, child trafficking, drug trafficking. It's we all these people venture to come through the border, and they're risking their life, and they're exposing
Yeah,
themselves to be raped. And I don't understand how this administration is pro that.
right.
I cannot be part of something
I think
that
I
is
think you
just.
feel if they get the more people in here, they have more voters. So I'm only speeding up a little bit. I could talk to you all night long. I'm enjoying the conversation, but I don't want to. I don't know how much longer you've got to talk about. But I want to make sure I focus on some of the things that would make you the person to vote for. That other people from Sheila Jackson Lee have been voting for her for so long. What would make them vote for you? We've talked about crime. We've talked about the the border. What could you do as a congresswoman on because getting rid of cash bail is more of a local issue. It's happening in New Orleans a whole lot where the new DA has gotten rid of cash bail. Criminals just get set free, or what
Yeah.
can you do as a congresswoman for that?
Well, I will support our police force. I
Mhm.
will never support defunding the police.
Right,
And I will never be that type of congresswoman that, there are many in Congress,
right.
congresswoman and congressmen that support this movement of defunding the police and reinforce that our police forces needs to be respected and needs to get the moral back because they've been demoralized, and that's not helping crime a lot. You many times you're seeing the police just looking at the crime and not doing anything because why risk it? They might
I
end
risk
up
it.
either killed or in jail. So that's we need to give back the pride to the force.
So obviously, would you do anything, I guess, to support legislation that would turn our oil production back on?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. What other hot topics are you talking about right now that would make people want to vote for you instead of Sheila Jackson Lee?
Well, like I said, crime, inflation, the border, that's very important. Against CRT, we need to stop brainwashing our children,
Hmm.
making villains or victims. We need to stop sexualizing our children. We need to start reinforcing the laws that were once in place in this country. Nobody respect anymore of the FCC rules when there was a schedule to protect the children for seeing things that were not appropriate for their age. And
Right.
nowadays it's everywhere, Disney, Nickelodeon. So that's very important. We need to give back the education system to each state.
I like that.
Each state needs to be in charge of the education of their children. And of course, as a survivor of domestic abuse, for me it's very important the protection of women.
Awesome. I'm sorry to hear that you were a victim, but I'm happy to hear that that empowered you to do things on a national level to take care of other women, not just in your district but around the country. So
Yes.
thank you for putting yourself out there like that. I appreciate that. I see. I noticed on your thing you have agriculture, on your push card, something about
Yes.
agriculture.
Yes, agriculture, because our farmers have been paid not to farm. And this is putting United States in a very difficult situation eventually. And it already did during the pandemic. We haven't seen the full blown of it. So we need to help our farmers get back to their land and farm it and make America self-sustainable, not only with energy, but
Mm.
with our food production for ourselves. I don't believe in depending on anybody. We can import whatever, but we need to be self-sustainable.
So talk to me a little bit about something. I don't know if you know much about this issue, but it's got on my radar a few months ago, and I've been seeing more and more reports about it that a lot of our farmland is being sold to foreign countries.
Yes.
So if we look at that issue, we look at our energy being that we're not tapping into our own resources, not only energy wise but food wise. You brought that up, and if we continue to sell our land to foreign countries, It's already a known fact, and I've talked with the commissioner of agriculture for my state here in Louisiana. He's actually the one that brought it to my attention, and he's talking about how these countries are buying up farmland. They're producing, fruits and they're producing on it, but they're shipping it to their countries. It's not being kept here in the United States. So, are you aware of that? And is it
Y-
something that you think you could do to help people not only in your state but our country?
Well, listen, it's well known that in Texas, the Chinese are buying our land, and they buy the land under LLCs. So you don't know you're selling the land to the Chinese. And now my question is, how is United States allowing for our enemy to buy our land? And that's something that we need to address at at the level of Congress. That we need to do something about it because we are allowing the enemy to enter our home.
Right. So you would do something to be able to stop that.
Yes,
Perfect. I love
definitely.
that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Well,
Yes.
Carmen, do you have any final words? Like I said, I could keep you longer, but I also know you. And actually, after we get off, after I end the broadcast, I still want to talk to you for a few minutes,
Okay.
offline. But do you have any final words that you want to say? I've had what you're scrolling. Do you see the scroll across the bottom of the screen?
Okay. Yes.
I've had
Mhm.
your website scrolling our whole time that we've been talking.
Perfect. I
So,
appreciate it. Well, that's what I want to tell to people. I want to tell a couple of things. First, get active. One of the problems with Venezuela was that everybody was like, I don't like politics. I want nothing to do with politics, to the point that we're not even voting. And then look what happened. Politics is not a career. Politics is a service, and we should all get involved at some point. There is the school districts. You can run as for mayor, as a councilman or councilwoman. There is the commissioner's court. There is so many possibilities, Congress, Senate, that we should all at some point in our life participate, service, and then get out. And because that was the idea of our founding fathers, for us to govern ourselves, not to be governed by anybody. And then please, yes, do go to carmenforcongress.com. The name, sadly, the name of this game is raise money, get money for the
yeah, right.
campaign.
Exactly.
So anything you can donate. This is about taking back our country. This is about taking back Congress and taking back Senate. For me, my case is taking back Congress. Do help me, and just go there, donate whatever you can. Little bits by little bits, it does add up.
Well, let's hope that it adds up enough for you to be able to win that seat against Sheila Jackson Lee. And I thank you so much for being on here tonight. I really do.
Thank you for having me.
But I'm gonna tell you, at this rate, would love to have you on again sometime,
Thank
and
you.
before the election, and we'll do another one. And people, I've had my podcast scroll at the bottom also, so people are gonna be able to see this video not just on Facebook. I have it saved on Facebook. I'll post it on on the YouTube channel. I'm gonna post it on my Rumble channel, and then I take the audio from from this video, and I make it into a podcast, so people who don't want to watch the video, they can just click the podcast on any podcast app, and they can listen to it anywhere in the world, might I add.
Oh,
So,
that's fantastic. Well, I'm gonna share it in my Facebook page and share it in Twitter when you send me the link for people to hear it. And please have me back. I will be more than happy to share more time with you and with your audience, so they get to know what we're doing, how our campaign is progressing, and for the big win on November the 8th.
I love it. Carmen, thank you so much. Hang on after I end the broadcast. I'll talk to you off camera for a second. Everybody else, thank you for tuning in. Please share the video when your podcast comes up. Share the podcast. I think that Carmen's story is a really important one to hear, because her story tells us why America is not only our last chance and stand for freedom, but it is that beacon of light on the hill that we need to protect at all costs, from not only our foreign invaders, but from the people within that seek to destroy us from within. Thank you so much for listening, and tune in. We got another show coming on tomorrow. Have a great night.
Thank you.